Golf is going to kick your ass on the regular, much like life will do as well. But if you just embrace the rough, embrace the difficulties, the challenges, and use them as opportunities to learn, then in time you'll be able to cherish the fairway, which in his case is winning the Masters. Welcome back everyone to GBA number 7. That's right, we're on number 7 now, Jack. We're coming up to the 10 episode mark on the GBA format, which is very exciting. And we are here recording this on Tuesday, the 15th of April, a little over 24 hours after Rory McIlroy golfed himself healthy. And more on that shortly. But yeah, like I say, kind of coming on to this episode today, there really could only be, two things. One is obviously the momentous occasion that was Rory McIlroy completing the career Grand Slam at Augusta National was actually probably the early hours of Monday morning here in the UK, Jack, by the time I got done. I was just about ready to go to bed. I was like, right, come on, Rory, knock in this putt on the 18th then, get it all done, and then I'll head straight up to bed. And he went and bloody missed it, didn't he? But it was very, very worthwhile. So we're going to talk about that in a decent bit of detail, and in true GYH style, I think we really want to major on the resilience that Rory has shown through the course of the weekend, but also through the course of his career, really, and in recent years to get there. Because I think for me, I don't know about you, that's the most invigorating, for want of a better word, part to this entire narrative and this storyline. Because that was sport at its finest. It was drama. It was everything that we love about golf and about sport, and that gets us stirred up. So we'll talk about that. Also going to talk a little bit about my recent experience on Friday at the Belfry at the Brabazon for the Lily May Foundation Charity Golf Day. But anyway, before all that, Jack, how are you this fine Tuesday?
Doing great. I think you mentioned resilience, and that's the most invigorating part for you, certainly for me as well, and for Rory also. He mentioned that word several times over the course of his media stuff that he did throughout the course of the week, and said that was kind of the trait in himself that he was most proud of. And I think resiliency is perhaps the most underrated skill a golfer can have, to not only to perform, but to golf yourself healthy, as you said. So it probably was the closest and finest line between somebody golfing themselves dead to golfing themselves healthy. And he navigated that, on quite the tightrope. So it'd be fun to talk through it, to see what we glean from it and what can be helpful for others.
Yeah, for sure. So let's definitely do that. Just like I say, I feel, let's be frank. If anyone's here for anything, they're probably here for the Masters chat. But equally, I do want to share a few, I think, relatively poignant reflections on my experience at playing at the Belfry just this past Friday. Because when you and I recorded last week's episode, I was in the middle of telling you that, this will be the first year in a while that I've actually not played golf when Masters weekend is on. And then I stopped myself and remembered, no, actually, I had this golf day on Friday. So it was, I was invited there by the guys who run the Lily May Foundation, which is named after Ryan Jackson, who's the founder and CEO of Lily May Foundation, named after his daughter, who he and his wife, Amy, lost. She was stillborn 16 years ago. And so Ryan and Amy, and now the team of staff that they have dedicated themselves to helping, in particular, bereaved dads, especially, but bereaved families with baby loss in all different ways that occurs. So I was a guest on their podcast. They have a podcast called the Still Parents Podcast. And so they're based in Birmingham, which is a couple of hours away from where I am. But I traveled over, was on their podcast, and then that's kind of started the relationship. That podcast hasn't been released yet, that I was just talking about, but when it has been, I might share it with this audience in case they want to listen to it. But so anyway, they, said, why don't you come along on Friday the 11th of April for this golf day? And it's in its 16th year now, so evidently they've been running it pretty much every year since the charity was founded. The Belfry, I don't know how much you know about the Belfry, Jack. I mean, we spoke about it last time around, right? It's it's a venue that's hosted the Ryder Cup four times in the last 30 years. The place, I'd never been there before, but it is a really impressive setup there. It's a very impressive kind of resort. So it's kind of a big, hotel, spa. But ultimately, the Belfry is where the PGA in the UK has its national headquarters. So if you train to become a PGA professional, teaching pro or whatever in the UK, that is generally where a lot of the classroom-based content happens. So they've got a really big academy, sort of on almost like a university campus there on site as well. But, as far as the golf side of it is concerned, it's state of the art, driving range, everything. It's got 3 18-hole golf courses, the Brabazon, the Ryder Cup course is the kind of the flagship course. And the day was fantastic. I mean, I think it's always cool when you get to go and play somewhere that's quite storied and got a lot of history. So you walk around the place and you walk through the corridors and there's pictures up everywhere of famous golfers, and especially those who have captained the Ryder Cup teams, or they had 2 big kind of conference rooms that were designated as the Team America room and the Team Europe rooms at the time they used it. So again, when you feel like you're walking in the footsteps of famous golfers, that for any golfer is quite a cool feeling. But I think more than anything else, the opportunity for me to play golf with other dads, other men who have been in my shoes. The one of the guys that I was in the 4-ball with has lost not one, but 2 babies prematurely for quite similar reasons, actually, to how Kim and I lost Innes, for chromosomal disorders and things like that. So I think I've just started writing a journal article about it, and I'll release it in the next week or 2. But I've started writing in there and talking about how, I guess I always enjoy playing golf on my own these days. I always have, but I kind of enjoy it a little bit more now because when I end up playing with randoms, there's always that risk of you getting into small talk and people asking questions and me sort of, being like, yeah, my son died. And then it kills the conversation kind of thing, and whereas you're in those environments and you're like, my son died. Yeah, so did mine. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it makes us feel, and let's talk about their memory. Let's talk about how much we love golf. Let's enjoy golf. Let's enjoy being in each other's company and laughing at each other's bad shots, celebrating each other's good shots, and actually realizing how one of the biggest takeaways I had from that day was because it was a day event, shotgun start. So they basically took over the golf course. So everyone was spread over the 18 holes, I guess, and the klaxon went off and off you go. And so there was real fun during the day. And then they had an evening dinner dance as well. And throughout the all of it, there was never at any point any sort of really maudlin feeling to it. Everything was really upbeat and positive, but in a way that felt kind of, I don't know, just a great community spirit, and just showing that, just because we've been through these traumatic life events doesn't mean that we have to be sort of, I can't find the words, but I'm sure you know what I mean. So I think, and again, amongst other things, a couple of other takeaways. I think as I look to the future for Golf Yourself Healthy, I think about how I'm going to continue to grow this and where I can have the most impact. Because as I've said to you and to the listener before, I'm all about inspiring people. Current golfers, people that aren't into golf yet, inspire them in their game of golf and in their game of life is going into, so at the dinner, the MC for the event, who's also the host of their podcast, got me up on completely out of the blue, was like, do you want to come up and address the audience? And I was like, okay, sure, why not? And got up there and told my story, Innes's story, the GYH story, and got this big round of applause. And I was like, I get so much energy from that. That's where I get my energy, is addressing big groups, but also just trying to inspire people. So I think I'm going to do some more, as a follow-up to that. I just had a follow-on conversation with the guys at the charity earlier today. We're hopefully going to try and arrange like a workshop and like a range day, maybe at the Belfry later in the year or another local venue, and do a bit of a fun thing at the driving range, but actually also have like a more classroom based like workshop where bereaved dads and granddads help each other out, and maybe focus on mental health and grief and things like that. So I'm really excited for that. But then also I notched up a tidy little par for myself on so get this right, 20.7 on the WHS system I am on my handicap. To give you a measure of how hard the Brabazon is relative to course rating, 20.7 gave me 27 shots on Friday. So like normally with the World Handicap system, it's like whatever your number is, add a couple of strokes. But that was like +6. And I was like, yes, I'm going to score like 42 points Stableford today. Happy days. No, that didn't happen. So, but I knocked up a number of gross pars, not just net pars. And one of them was on the 10th at the Brabazon, which do you know the hole I'm talking about? Well, yeah, of course you do. So our man Sevi, well, in fact, actually, you tell the story. I sent you a little video earlier. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I mean, so as far as I remember, it's a shorter par four, probably 300 in length or something like that. I believe you have to carry a little bit of a creek or hit over a tree. It's a little bit of an exotic tee shot, but going for it certainly represents the swashbuckling approach, I would say. And I think in the Ryder Cup, where first of all, he was wearing the most beautiful cashmere pinkish coral sweater of all time, always looked impeccable on the golf course, hit a miraculous shot to kind of, really set the tone for the European victory for that Ryder Cup, and hit it quite close to the hole from what I remember. So an iconic hole, iconic golf shot. Must have been a thrill for you to set up there and try and replicate it in whatever fashion that you were able to.
Well, I absolutely did not try and mimic what he did. Just seven iron, safety first. No going for the green for me.
No swamp.
Absolutely not. Just really boring. But so I managed to sort of I knocked a 7 iron down there before the creek, and then took a 50-degree wedge, leaked it into the sand trap to the right of the green, which, by the way, is on TV. It already looks like a small green, but when you get up to it, it's even smaller. And I managed to just like hit a lovely 60-degree wedge, bunker shot out, knocked it in for the par.
Lovely
waved
stuff.
to the crowds, walked off. So that was really nice. But anyway, that was my experience. So,
well, I'd say that leaking iron shots from the middle of the fairway to the right is probably a nice segue for where we can go today. But also just to say, Chris, I think what's really cool is the fact that you've had these two experiences recently, both at the health conference and at this tournament gathering charitable event, where you are able to get up in front of people and speak and share your story and receive that warmth, that applause. You mentioned at the conference, people coming up to you afterwards. I think a lot of times when you do a podcast, by its very nature, you're siloed, right? And you don't get to feel that kind of how you are able to impact others. So I'm so happy for you that you're able to have two of those experiences, because they can be very invigorating and catalyzing as you continue to grow this, and you can see the power of it that happens in person. And one thought that came to mind when you were talking about the Belfry and how it has the PGA kind of headquarters there and kind of that classroom setup and your idea for the future, piggybacking a little bit on the podcast from last week with the two gentlemen who were in the physio program internship, whatever that was called. They were talking about kind of adding programming to golf courses around more health-based initiatives, right? I think they were looking at it from more of a physical standpoint. Obviously, this would be more of a mental standpoint. But how great would it be for the Belfry to play host to a conference, a class, a seminar on golfing yourself healthy and the mental health benefits of getting people into the game. So, I think a lot of times this game takes us to places that end up being very important parts of our lives. And, that could be something that impacts you for a long time to come if you're able to continue on that legacy there. So I think that's a great story. I'm really excited for you, and more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Let's see where it takes us. So, yeah, thank you for that. Like you rightly said, leaking shots into bunkers on the right-hand sides of greens, very appropriate. It was almost like what I did on Friday was a sign of what was to come for Rory, but that's probably where the comparisons begin and end to me and Rory. What do we need to say about this, Jack? I need you to start here.
I've read a couple of articles this week that have been around the same theme, that was perhaps the last great golf story in terms of what it means and what it represents. I don't think we will ever get a figure in our game who is as successful yet as approachable as Rory McIlroy has been. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for constantly opening up a vein and letting people into his world and seeing his experience on the golf course. So the passion that his fans and the people supporting him and the fans of golf history had in wanting to see him close that out was unlike anything we've seen since Tiger, and that was for an entirely different perspective. One was kind of chasing greatness and history, and while Rory's doing the same thing, Tiger's a superhero. Rory, we can see elements of us in him, right? The human frailty, the Achilles heel, the challenge struggle. I have to say, I was obviously not rooting for him to self destruct down the stretch, but I was left with it didn't feel quite right for him to romp to victory. This was such a moment, something for him to conquer, to overcome, that, everyone kind of falling by the wayside and him trotting home with a 5-shot victory felt slightly unfulfilling. And I would imagine it's somewhere deep in his subconscious, it might have felt unfulfilling to him. And he had to put himself through the fire in that excruciating fashion. But the shot, obviously, that I will remember for the rest of my life is the shot that he hit into 15. And he had an 87-yard wedge shot on 13, where he had the state of Georgia to his left that he could have put that golf ball, and he missed it right. And then he had to hit the most perfectly executed high draw hook 6-iron, whatever 7-iron that he hit 15 to 3 feet. And that right there is a really beautiful dichotomy of what Rory represents, which is he's able to touch the heights that, we can only dream of, that none of us will really be able to do. Mere mortals could never dream of hitting a shot like that. But he's also eminently relatable to dump the shot at the bunker on 18, to miss the putt on 18, to hit it into the water on 13. So it's a beautiful story. He's a wonderful character for the game. I'm thrilled that he's able to etch his place in history. And it was an incredibly enjoyable viewing experience. And I think we all learned a lot about the game and life as a result.
Yeah. Like you said, as you started speaking, I think it was on Sunday's coverage or Saturday, I don't remember, here on Sky Sports in the UK, like there was just this segment before he teed off, and like the words resilience, and I want to say adversity, either, it was resilience was like headline on the screen on the highlight reel, and the words resilience and adversity got peppered in commentary and in various forums over the course of the weekend. And I reflect on hearing a soundbite from, and also Dr. Bob Rotella got mentioned multiple times as Rory's mental game coach, psychologist that he's been working with. There was I don't know if you've heard the soundbite. You might not have this one, because I heard a clip on BBC Radio 5 that I was listening to yesterday evening, where they'd interviewed him soon after Rory won, and he talked about how what was especially impressive about this win was the manner of it. Like you said a moment ago, in terms of it didn't feel right that he was going to romp to victory. He had to have multiple setbacks over the course of the 4 days, and especially on the final day, before he picked up the trophy. And so it was the manner of how he... So he had to deal with a combination of both self-inflicted and matters outside of his control, i.e. Justin Rose storming up the leaderboard, for example. He handled all of that. He found a way to do it, which he seemingly hasn't been able to do before. And I think, I love what you said about just how relatable, I think was the word that you used, he actually is. And I so love that, because, again, it's not lost on me that, you know, in many ways, for us mere mortals who are club golfers, we can only dream of getting to the level that he is at, and to be able to hit that shot that he hit in the 15th, to hit a 7-iron 200 yards or whatever it is, okay? And to execute that with such perfection. But to execute it with such perfection in the circumstances as well. Because let's not forget, you know, again, there was a blend of how, you know, so he self-imploded a few times, but then instantly brought it back around. And that just shows how far he's come and how he's worked on himself. But even through having done all this work on himself, he's still flawed, ultimately. And there's this feeling that so what's going to be most fascinating for me now is rather where Rory goes from here. Because I theorise that there's 2 scenarios I could see playing out here. One, he's going to tear it up, because he's got the monkey off his back now. Or there's going to be a bit of almost like a downturn in a way, because like I just wonder if you look at his expressions and it was like the release of this pressure valve, like all the emotion that poured out of him, that is going to be exhausting. And I think for at least a little while afterwards, that's going to take quite a bit out of him. I just wonder, like, I'd love to know how he really feels right now. Is he totally ecstatic? Or is he almost like, whoa, geez, like, because he's been through so much, hasn't he? You know?
He certainly has. I think he withdrew from Harbor Town this week, which makes sense, right? The opportunity to have that cathartic release and just kind of have that emotional recovery that I'm sure he needs. The fascinating thing for me is the next major is the PGA at Quail Hollow, which is a venue that he has had an immense amount of success at. So he seems to be an individual who understands the historical nature of the game and his legacy and where he fits into it. He's now tied with Brooks Koepka at 5 majors, and I think that it's very important for him to firmly establish himself as the greatest player of his generation, which I think everybody would agree he is. But the fact remains that he's still tied with Brooks when it comes to majors. So I think he's going to be very motivated by that to put number 6 on the board and to continue on from there. So, I mean, he's definitely going to be the favorite going into the PGA. His resume this year is Pebble Beach, Sawgrass, and the Masters. That's about as good as it gets in terms of how to start your year off. And I think to me, Rory has always reminded me of a racehorse. When he starts bouncing and kind of like getting into his rhythm, it's just like that horse that can gallop faster than everybody else on the racetrack. But for some reason, they may get distracted when other horses are jostling with them or not able to fully reach his top speed because of whatever other circumstances are going on. And I think this is just like tossing the jockey off, getting the saddle off. There's no weight, there's no burden, and it's just a straight sprint from here. He never has to carry any of that with him from now on. And as we saw in the final round, when he's free, he plays some of the best golf you've ever seen in your entire life. His best shots were his escape shots, including the one on number 15. The one on number 7 is, one of the all-time escape shots over the trees to put it into that position that he did. And I think when he has that freedom to see shot, hit shot, he performs better than just about anybody else in the history of the game, I would argue.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about that point is so seemingly his caddy, his longtime caddy and friend, Harry Diamond, was actively trying to talk him out of hitting that shot through the trees on the 7th. but nobody tells Rory what to do. And this is my point around his self-belief. Okay, so it's so interesting that juxtaposition, because on the one hand, Rory is evidently this supremely confident person, has to be, before he can get to where he's got to, but he is he's fragile at the same time, which is remarkable somehow, that like he's able to have achieved that, and what he's just achieved. But like you said, that's what makes him relatable. And I would encourage any listener to, much like any, like, again, social media yesterday and the day before was just awash with like reflections from golf influencers or golf coaches, or not even just people outside of golf as well, because such has been the impact of this story around what can we learn as human beings from the adversity that Rory has been through in the last however many years. And there's one clip I can think of that I saw on Instagram where he was giving an interview from some time ago, where he speaks about how essentially he's grateful for his setbacks and his failures, because they have shaped him and helped him learn. That is, again, like I said to you, you and I were exchanging texts within minutes of him winning, and I said he has just epitomized what it means to golf yourself healthy.
100%.
And I think just anyone. So when I often like to raise that question or think about what are the many different meanings that could exist around the saying, the statement, golf yourself healthy, or the call to action to golf yourself healthy, it's to kind of go, golf is going to kick your ass on the regular, much like life will do as well. But if you just embrace the rough, embrace the difficulties, the challenges, and use them as opportunities to learn, then in time, you'll be able to cherish the fairway, which in his case is winning the Masters.
Just a couple quick things. Number one, for as supremely confident as he is, he said specifically, I was so nervous on the first tee. That is a stark contrast to what we've heard from our golf heroes before. Tiger Woods would never let you know that he was nervous on the first tee. He was a superhero who was unrelatable in a golfing sense, right? And Rory is the most relatable superstar we've ever had, right? I also think you shared, that beautiful sentiment that Rory talked about, which is his adversity has shaped him in the macro, right? All these coming up short at Pinehurst, coming up short at the Open 150th Open at St. Andrews, all these different experiences where it would have been, such an amazing experience if he won. How about on the first hole when he makes double bogey, right? And they asked him about making double on number one, and he said in a weird way it made him settle down making double. And he thought about John Rahm. He thought about how John Rahm had four-putted the first hole and gone on to win. And it's very interesting because when he said that, it made me think about something that the Anfield Rap podcast talks all the time about soccer matches, where they say sometimes when you give up an early goal, it's almost a really good thing for the team that gives it up, because the worst thing has happened and you realize that you're okay. And that's what happened to Rory. The worst possible thing that could happen. He was going into Saturday, the dusk on Saturday evening, with the potential for a 4 or 5 shot lead. All of a sudden, Bryson makes this miracle putt on the 54th hole, and it's a 2-shot lead. Then he goes and plays the first hole, gone, evaporated, right? He's still standing. He's still alive. He's still breathing. He's got 17 more holes to play. That has to be like resuscitation of your experience, where you're like, I'm still here. I experienced the worst that I can feel, and I'm still standing. And to me, that's, the golf yourself healthy mindset right there.
Yeah, definitely. Which leads us to talking about what have you made of this clip, this frankly clickbait clip around Bryson DeChambeau saying, yeah, Rory didn't talk to me the whole day?
I think that Bryson's an odd character to read in his communication strategy. He's just kind of built for social media in a weird way. It almost feels like an algorithm is spitting out what's coming out of his mouth, even though he does seem very heartfelt a lot of times as well. I didn't make a big deal of it. I think that they presented it as him being frustrated or annoyed or aggravated that Rory hadn't spoken to him. Sure, if you want to read into it, maybe that was the tone that he was expressing. He also just lost a golf tournament, played horrifically on Sunday. So maybe that's where his tone is coming from. And I think at the end of the day, there's so much gamesmanship to see if you're able to look beneath the surface. I'll just say this, Chris. Bryson had obviously the leg up with the Pinehurst experience. And then you had that whole social media clip that went viral in between when they're at some corporate event on the driving range and somebody asked Rory, who would you like to get paired with in the final round of a major, to beat them? And he goes, I'd like to get paired with Bryson for what he did to me at Pinehurst. And Bryson says, to be honest, you did it to yourself, right? So Bryson has established this psychological edge over Rory that he can get it done when it matters, and Rory falters and wilts under the pressure, right? So as Bryson's chasing him the entire time over the weekend, he's putting out these subtle messages that if you're attuned to it, it's obvious to see. When he made the birdie on 16 on Saturday, and he did kind of like the WWE wrestling, where he like stands at the crowd and gets them pumped up. He wants that extra reaction so Rory hears him, right? So Rory knows that his footsteps are coming. If you watch how they went to the first tee on Sunday, Rory got there about a minute and a half, 2 minutes before his tee time. Bryson waited until the last possible second to get to the first tee because he wanted Rory to feel his presence, the crowd, the literal and figurative footsteps coming behind him. So what does Rory do to counteract that? Does he play into that? Does he talk to him? Rory talked extensively about creating his own bubble, about living in his own world. And when you see him on the golf course, he had such a serene and placid visage, right? Like nothing was affecting him. On the 72nd hole, he was eating that snack, the protein bar, and drinking water like he was just having a snack on a casual round. There's nothing that you can see. It's a duck above water with the feet going like this. So I think that they both played their game. They both tried to do what they were trying to do. Bryson would have loved to get into Rory's head and to talk to him and to kind of do that stuff. And Rory kept him at bay and was in his own little world. And I think it was a great move by him, and it's how you play the game. So it was fascinating to me.
That is a wonderful insight that you've just offered there, because first of all, I think I share a similar view on Bryson in relation to, or an observation, let's say, around his communication style. Because there was a point during the weekend, especially on the final day, where I just got to remembering, I thought, if you look at what Bryson is now and how he's styling himself now, this is a far cry from the Bryson who used to use a protractor on the greens a few years ago and was like the scientist. Basically. He still is the scientist. But back then, the last thing I could really imagine was him becoming this YouTube star and like you say, the social media star that he is now. But it just what you've just said gets me to wondering just how much of it is an act at the end of the day, because whereas on the one hand, Rory has probably for most of his career, but I think the turning point for him in terms of opening the vulnerability vault was at Portrush in Northern Ireland, because that's the first time I ever saw him crying openly, on Sky Sports after he missed the cut in his home open, right? And ever since then, he's been an open book. However, it's almost as if Bryson's kind of latched on to the textbook way to get people on your side is play the nice guy, even although actually you're not naturally wired that way, if you get what I'm trying to say. But it's all a ruse, essentially, is my feeling with him. What do you think?
Yeah, it's so tough. It's so tough to comprehend because we were talking about Chat GPT before. It's almost like the inputs have been put in to Bryson of like, fan engagement improves when you slap high fives when you're going up the thing. When you interact with the audience, it's like this putting a heart into a machine in a certain way. I think he's a fascinating character to me because you can tell when he does do that stuff, he is so desperate for connection. He's so desperate for community. His world must be so isolating in just how his brain works, the nature of his profession, and what he does. And he really, in my opinion, struggles to connect with people in a terribly authentic way. And you can see him trying to do that. Applaud him for doing that, even if it doesn't come
Yeah.
across as the most authentic at times. But I think what Rory does is I'll just say this. I know a few people who are in and around professional golf at that level. And, they'll sit in the locker room and they'll tell stories and say, oh, this guy was kind of a jerk, or this guy was cool, or this guy was whatever. And to a person, of the few people I know in that world, the stories about Rory are what you see is what you get, and how doesn't matter if you are the lowest person on the totem pole at an event. Good morning. How are you today? Nice to see you. Good luck out there. He's Rory
Yeah.
effing McIlroy. He doesn't have to say anything to anybody. And by all accounts, Bryson is not like that behind the scenes. So I think you can kind of see the difference there.
Yeah.
Rivalry, though. I mean, and on the grounds to have the Live boys, riding super hard for Bryson, and all the people with heart and soul riding for Rory McIlroy, and this clash of these two completely different ways of approaching championship golf. Wow, I just wish it was a little bit more head to head. I guess on the final round, I think Bryson really, his game left him. But it's a really interesting case study on how we can all approach the game differently.
Definitely, and so maybe to round out on this, and it is a couple of things. I think, what you just said there about what you see is what you get with Rory. Equally, I have heard the same. So you remember we had Selena Samuela, Peloton instructor, on this podcast a few episodes back, season 3. She told me that she had met him. I can't remember where. Like, she obviously played some golf course, or because he's a member at the Bear Club or something, isn't he? So I don't know if it was there or somewhere in Florida. Anyway, I'm sure it was. And he came over to her and was like, "Oh, you're Selena Samuela, Peloton instructor." She was like, "What?" Like, this should be the other way around right now.
Yeah.
I should be the one sort of like recognizing you and sort of having a sort of an in awe moment. But yeah, so he's real. He is what you see is what you get, and and he did it to Andy Murray, tennis legend as well. Like, he went up to him at Wentworth BMW PGA on the driving range, was like, "Hey man, great to see you," kind of thing. And Andy Murray's face is like, and again, this is a guy who's won majors in tennis. And like that, but that's the Rory McIlroy effect, right? So, but I love that. And again, that's also tied into Golf Yourself Healthy, is being, striving to be your best self in golf, but as a human being as well. And authenticity, vulnerability, these are the things I value in human beings. And that is why I reckon Augusta, the patrons are pulling for Rory this weekend, because the heart and soul guys, like you were saying, like that because he resonates with them. He's one of them, so and that was beautiful. But also it takes us back to the whole Dr. Ian Peake in season 2, toughies versus chatties. I mean, it was, Bryson seemingly wanted to play the chatty guy. Rory was not having any of it. He was really in his toughie zone. And it worked. It was great, and it was the right strategy. He had to be. So yeah,
But Tuffy in his own way too. Tiger was a toughie to Tony Finau when they were paired together. And the famous story is Finau says to him walking off the 7th tee or 5th tee, whatever it was, "How are the kids, Tiger?" And he's like, "They're fine," and just keeps walking. And that was the only thing that they said all day. That's Tuffy Navy SEAL Tiger. Rory was, he hit that shot on 7. He's laughing with Harry. He's kind of like, kind of showing his like little bit of a goof side as well. And so he's a toughie in that he's not interacting, but he's not portraying something that he's not. He's completely authentically himself, which I think is the best way to play your best golf. And I just wanted to say one last thing, Chris, which is you've had a couple of those interviews, I think most notably with Dave Jones from Sky Sports, talking about the experience playing at Wentworth and hitting in front of people and duffing a shot or not hitting a good one and feeling that wave of embarrassment roll over you. And I think what Rory showed, I hope what Rory showed and the message that people can take from his experience is it's okay to fail. It's okay to be vulnerable. This is one of the greatest golfers who's ever lived. He had his biggest job on the first hole of that final round is to protect his lead and play well. And he's like, I'm nervous. And I hit a couple bad shots and I did not do well. And so if that guy who's, now etched in the history of the game with the greatest who's ever played, feels that way and can mess up under the brightest spotlight, pick himself up, dust himself off, and move on. All the 10 handicappers, 15 handicappers, people who are paired with somebody on the first tee who they don't know, and they're worried they're going to get judged, and they hit a big slice and it goes into the trees. Don't worry about it. It's all good. This is what this game does, is it forces you to confront those situations. And Rory was a master at showing us all how to deal with that with grace and poise. And to me, that's one of his greatest qualities.
Yep. Not much more I'm going to add to that. So well said. And let's wrap it up there. But before we go, is just to remind you all, the listeners, please subscribe to the Golf Yourself Healthy Substack if you haven't already. The link for that is in the show notes. That is where I will be releasing the aforementioned GYH Journal article documenting my experience at the Belfry, and also that just is where that's our main distribution platform now for the podcast as well. So do check that out. And Jack and I will be back with GBA number 8 sometime in probably the next week or two. So do look forward to that. And until then, you know the score. Always embrace the rough and forever cherish the fairway.